Hi, and welcome. Today we're going to talk about understanding virtual autism. And this is going to be a quick overview on what it is and what are the differences. We will talk about the learning objectives. But there's a new phenomenon is emerging in child development, which is called virtual autism. Others they're calling it differently, but virtual autism describes the autism-like symptoms in children with excessive screen exposure. And since 2010, cases have risen dramatically, and many countries now they report growing concern about early digital media's impact on developing minds. I'm Bahij Khouzami, a board certified behavior analyst. I am an international behavior analyst and a professional advisory board member for the IBAO in UAE and in Kuwait. And I'm the founder of Autism Intervention Specialists in Dubai. And I also serve as the clinical director for Evolve Early Intervention Center in Kuwait. So today we're going to talk about what is classic autism, what is virtual autism, what virtual autism is caused by what are the causes, the theory behind virtual autism, what is considered as screens, because different people they describe screens in a different way, so we want to make that clear, how to differentiate between virtual autism and the classical or the clinical autism, medical recommendation for screen time, and how to effectively decrease screen time. So, what is classic autism spectrum disorder? I won't go a lot in depth about this. Maybe mostly everybody knows, most people they know. But autism, with its forms, it has become a reality for our society. So the autistic child is often isolated in his own thoughts, or that's what it's hypothesized. Not all, but most of them without the ability to communicate or to relate himself to anyone, whoever they might be. Now, the child with autism creates a world of his own that he prefers, where it gives him a sense of security and predictability. And autism is a quantum or a spectrum. So it goes from a very serious extreme where the child remains nonverbal, non communicative, to non speaking, to the rare exceptional extreme where we might bring scientists and engineer. We meet bright scientists and engineers, musicians, painters, people that can recite dates and calculators like a human calculator, all that. So the symptoms typically starts, or that's what it used to be thought, at around 3 years old, 2 to 3 years old, and the formal diagnosis used to be given accurately at 3 years old. But now recent studies show that they can accurately diagnose autism by 18 months, which is 1 year and a half, if you have a good clinician who knows what they're looking for. And the core features of autism are social deficits, communication, and behavioral challenges, or repetitive and restricted patterns of behaviors. So, with virtual autism, it is believed to be technology induced. So, they did a study by the Autism Center for Children and the Children with Autism in Romania that showed that 90% of children aged 2 to 3 years old who are diagnosed with autism are the trigger factor of overwatching television programs or other forms of reality virtual. So most of these kids in that study, they were believed to watch a lot of videos or a lot of screens at that age, and the symptoms they emerge after. So they started showing up the symptoms of autism-like behaviors after the exposure of excessive screen time. So children may show social withdrawal and communication delays, but this has no genetic basis. So it's not caused by genetics, unlike classic autism. So there is no established neurological origin that exists. And environmental factors, they do play the primary role. So when we say environmental factors, we are talking about the exposure to screens at early age. The developmental impact is most commonly affected in toddlers and in young children during a critical brain development stages. So there is a very critical developmental stage, which is between 0 and 2 years. Some they say 3 until 3, that we don't want these children to be exposed to screens because the brain is fast and rapidly developing. So, what constitutes as screens? An iPad is a screen, Nintendo Switch is a screen, a phone is a screen, television is a screen. And if you are on your phone and the child is looking over to your phone, that also constitutes as screen time. I've had families that say, oh, we just have the television run in the background while he's playing or while he's like during the day. That's also television exposure. So any screen could be considered as screen. Anything that has a screen, even in the car, if you have a screen attached to the back of your seat, that also can be considered as screen. And if you're running videos and games and stuff, so that would be considered as screen. Look at this picture here. This, I feel very sad to see this picture, and because this became the norm in most houses where two parents are present physically, but mentally, psychologically, spiritually, call it whatever you want, they're not available. And the child is also on his phone, not being attended to parents and not attending to parents or anything in his environment. Now, virtual autism is not a formally recognized diagnosis in any formal diagnostic tool. So in the DSM-5 and in the ICD-11, which is the International Classification of Diseases, it's not a formally recognized diagnosis yet. However, it is a conceptual framework used to highlight the potential developmental effects of excessive screen time, and it emphasized the critical importance of early childhood interaction and engagement. So it doesn't exist in any diagnostic tool, but it is common among practitioners. They have seen it in their practices. We've seen it in our assessments, in our work with children. So it is a conceptual framework. Why was it called virtual autism? Okay, so that name came from a symptoms of children with autism that show perfectly identical symptoms to kids with autism. So it was called like that from a Romanian clinical psychologist called Marius Zamfir. And he said that it mimics, or it has identical, exactly the same behaviors as autism when these kids were exposed to screens early on in their development. And these are a couple of studies. We're going to talk about one study in particular in the next few slides. So this research checked screen time and children with autism, a spectrum disorder, this one virtual autism, and its effects on the child evolution, and the association between screen time exposure in children at 1 year of age and ASD at 3 years of age in Japan. There are more studies. There's a lot of studies that has come out since 2018, because the research done by this Romanian clinical psychologist was in 2018. So the theory behind virtual autism is that the child is sitting in front of the screen. He doesn't have the usual language experience, which is the dialogic, or what we say the back and forth style of communication that is designed to stimulate thinking, to stimulate language, or learning through having a dialogue. So there is no stimulation of thoughts and reflection that parents or grandparents or the human environment generally offers. The visual and the auditory stimuli perceived in front of the small screen, they are so aggressive and they are so fast that the brain of a child cannot process it. It exceeds the brain's ability to control all this aggressive and fast stimuli. So the invariable effect will be the inhibition of some important mental processes that the kid is not being exposed to because of these screens. And the child lacks also the knowledge by touching and by physically manipulating the materials, which is one of the conditions for conducting the process of knowledge and hence structuring neural pathways. That's why we encourage kids to play in the playgrounds outside, to go into the mud or experience playing with sand or climbing trees and playing with dirt. because they get that knowledge through touching, through physical manipulation of things, explore the forest, the garden, water, a lot of these things. So after prolonged viewing, a lot of viewing, children will tend to remain in the same state of passivity or non involvement in the knowledge of the real world. So, because they're not moving, they're not going places, they're just sitting down and watching. Those who watch TV, their ability to imagine games is proportional. Their mental dynamics weakens, and this is from a study in 2008 that shows that when you're watching TV, well, back then there wasn't smartphones, but there was TV. So that study saw the people who, or the kids who were watching TV, they don't have this creativity and that imaginativity. Child development stage between 0 to 2 years is called the stage of sensory motor development. What happens at this stage? At this stage, the child reacts reflexively in activities such as sucking, hitting, grabbing, and it begins to coordinate the visual, the auditory, and the tactile information it receives from the environment. So through the sensations, with the motor skills that is developed. So when you expose these children to water play, sand play, mud play, touching trees, touching the grass, touching the floor, touching materials, touching the hammer, whatever they are doing, that contributes to their development. At this stage, the kids, they find that if they move their eyes, they have access to several images and ways and different ways also. And they may even notice how their own hands and feet, they interact with various objects. So if I put my hands like this happens. If I move my feet and I put it on some item, it moves this way. So that's how the brain develops at this stage. The screens are so appealing that it's difficult for the child, and any child, even adults, to come back to something else. But specifically for children who didn't develop yet the skill of shifting their attention from one thing to another. So when you have a kid who's immersed in screens, it's very difficult for them to cut that, go back to something, and then go to something and then go back to something else. Now, the clinical presentation and diagnostic red flags are communication challenges, which include speech delay or language delay, reduced verbal interaction. They don't have that much verbal interaction between adults and other peers. Echolalia, which means that they repeat phrases or words without knowing the meaning of it. They also show some social behaviors, loss or poor eye contact, decreased social interest. They're not interested in other children and other people, preference for being alone and doing things alone and by themselves. So the first thing that I notice parents tell me when they do stop screens for their children is the improvement of eye contact. So social behavior is very important. General behavior and sensory, we see a lot of repetitive behaviors, a lot of tantrum when they are denied screens. And there's a ton of videos on social media showing not only children with autism or with virtual autism, they show these things. Teenagers, adults, when they're denied screens or their games or their PS5, they throw huge tantrums. They show short attention span, they show some hyperactivity and some sensory issues. I got to hear some very nice symptoms of virtual autism that represents some nice visuals. So I won't go through this, but whatever we discussed, they are here in a very nice visual. So this study in 2018 checked the early electronic screen exposure and autistic-like symptoms. They took 9 children. These are the 9 children who met the criteria for autistic-like behavior, and they were 6 males and 3 females, aged 44 months, which is 3 years and 8 months, to 78 months, 6 years and 6 months. All children, they had speech delay as a main complaint or as a chief complaint. And among those, one case was nonverbal. So only one person was nonverbal and the rest, they were able to talk. The time of first exposure was very early for these children, all of them, and they all had exposure before the age of 2 years old. And moreoverly, two cases had been exposed before the age of one. So most of them below two, but two cases were exposed below 2 years, below 1 year, which is the first one and the third person, which is one male and one female. Now, children who spent watching less or equal to 3 hours per day, they had language delay and short attention span, while children who spent viewing more or equal to 3 hours per day had language delay, short attention span, and hyperactivity. So the difference was that if they have, and you can see here, above or equal to 5 hours or below and equal to 3 hours, you can see that the hyperactivity was present in the ones that they watched 5 hours equal or more than 5 hours, which is very interesting to note. Now, what causes it? What causes virtual autism? It is believed to be caused by extensive exposure to screen time during the early life of infant and toddler. This is what we have been discussing all along since the beginning. So, due to the excessive exposure and due to the reasons that we explained earlier, there's a lack of development of the neurological system due to lack of psychic, motor, sensory, social behavior, psychosocial stimulation. All these things, they play a role in causing it. So this is also from a recent study by Sharma in 2025. They pinpointed the causes of virtual autism: excessive screen time, limited parental involvement, and reduced social interaction. So when, let's say, COVID hit, not a lot of social interaction, that's where we started seeing more children with speech delay, more children with social deficits, social skills deficits, and overstimulation from the digital media. These smartphones and anything that you see on a smartphone or on TV was designed to keep you engaged, was designed to keep you hooked, to keep watching. This is a case example for a 3-year-old and a 3 years and 2 months old boy. He had limited communication. He came from a nuclear family. Nuclear family means that father, mother, and a child, no extended family members. He showed some limited communication, hyperactivity, short attention span, playing by himself, a lot of repetitive behaviors, and anger outbursts. He was exposed to 4 to 5 hours of screen time per day from the age of 1, while he was cared by a secondary caregiver because the parents were working. And he had very little outdoor play. Parental attention further declined after they had another baby. So he was the first one. He didn't get the attention enough. And that also decreased when they had another baby, which caused an increased reliance on screens. So he now got more screens that he's watching more screens now. At preschool, he struggled at school. He struggled with communication, with sharing, and with behaviors. After 3 to 4 months of screen free, he was diagnosed with severe autism. Okay. So the difference between both is first the onset. When does it happen? Okay. So with the classic autism, it typically presents in early childhood and is primarily caused by genetic or neurological factors, making it a lifelong condition. So it doesn't go away and it's not cured. It cannot be cured, which we will talk about what to do with virtual autism. Okay. But with virtual autism, any age with a screen overuse. So you might see some kids or some teenagers, even 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, overusing these screens. They might show these hyperactivity behaviors. They might show the stimming, the repetitive movements, the repetitive behaviors. I know a kid who's 18 years old. When he gets excited, he starts flapping his hands nonstop until he's not excited anymore. But he doesn't have autism. So social motivation in classic autism is often inherently reduced, and while intervention can lead to meaningful progress, the core characteristics usually they stay with the classic autism, but the main symptoms or the concerns for virtual autism, they go away. On the contrary, Virtual autism, it is considered to be environmental, caused by in the environment, which is the introduction of screen time, and is potentially reversible if screen time is reduced and it is replaced with responsive social interaction and structured play. So when you dedicate time to the child and you expose the child to more social interaction, more play, structured play, not just okay, go play by yourself outside. No, structured play, parental involvement, that can reverse these symptoms. But with classic autism, if it's genetics, neurological, you can't reverse that. Okay. With social motivation, so as we said, classic autism is a lifelong condition. It's not something that you can cure yourself from. And the virtual autism is potentially reversible. Some studies, they show that it was reversible. So there's a high chance of reversibility if it was virtual autism. If it was classic autism, it cannot be reversed. I know a lot of parents, they do want to believe that it is caused by the virtual autism, what they see in their child, but that warrants careful interpretation and deep dive into history of the child and the family. So with social motivation, it may return with proper intervention. Understanding the differences between the two presentations is essential for appropriate assessment and tailoring the intervention to be effective. Otherwise, just saying, okay, I'm going to stop the screens, and then what? What else do you have to offer to the child so he can improve? Okay. For social motivation in classic autism, it is often by default or inherently reduced by itself. It's not reduced because of the exposure of screens. The epidemiology and risk factors of virtual autism: the electronic screen stimulation in early stage leads to dysregulation and disorganization of several biological systems. And since 2015, a growing number of cases have been reported across Europe, the Middle East, Asia, suggesting a global trend linked to increased digital media use and social media use or screen use, and decreased real world engagement. Now, these days, kids, they don't want to socialize. Teenagers don't want to socialize. Adults don't want to socialize because they rely heavily on screens. Lack of interactive, imaginative play correlates with the symptom development. So these factors combined altogether, they contribute to symptoms that can mimic or overlap with autism, and underscoring the importance of early environmental adjustments and structured intervention. That's why it's very important to understand the family history, how much and how much time kids and when these kids were exposed to that, if there's any family history, doing tests to check if it's genetics or not. So for clinical guidelines, how do you assess and you differentiate? First of all, you document the developmental milestones and screen exposure patterns. So you need to have a comprehensive history first. Then you evaluate the family interaction patterns and screen habits. So you have the family assessment, how long they stayed with the child, how much they played together, how much they were interacting with the child, what did they do together. Then you apply a standard testing. It could be the ADOS-2, it could be the CARS, and other diagnostic tools alongside clinical observation. So there has to be some clinical observation in the nursery, in the home, in the clinic, not only in one place. Then you monitor the symptom changes during controlled screen limitation period. So when you have the screen reduction trial, you check and you monitor if these changes are getting these symptoms better and the kid is catching up. Okay. Now, for the diagnostic challenges, there is no universally accepted criteria that exists yet. Often we have to rely on ruling out other conditions, okay? And with medical exclusion, we must rule out any genetic, any metabolic, or any neurological causes. This may require some specialized testing and consultation. And with the current DSM-5 or ICD-11 frameworks. There's inadequate addressing of screen-induced symptoms, so they don't have these classified yet. This creates challenges for formal diagnosis and treatment. So everything from assessment to getting to know the difference is not formally done. It's all through observation and clinical judgment. I want to make this very, very, very clear. Classic autism is not reversible. Virtual autism can be reversible. It has a very high percentage of being reversed. All right. So if you hear somebody who says classic autism was reversed, that means from the beginning it wasn't autism from the beginning. Okay. Now, some evidence-based interventions, reducing screen-induced delays. So definitely the first thing you do is you need to reduce the screen. So you will have a structured elimination of digital media exposure. Not one day he is watching 3-4 hours and then the next day he doesn't have access to that completely. You will have a big problem. You will have a big behavior problems. So you need to have a plan. Parent-child interaction. You should enhance your play more with the child, have more play routine, face-to-face engagement, not on the phone or virtual or in daycares only. Language stimulation, speak more, have more social communication, go to speech therapy, do ABA, do anything that could be language stimulation. And the most important part is parent training. Education and behavioral intervention techniques is amazing for parents to know these things. Now, this slide highlights something very, very powerful. Within just 2 months, European studies, they show very marked improvements in recovery rates. So they had around 80% or so of a recovery rate, and just within weeks of removing screens, they were showing how small changes can really spark real progress. And most interestingly is that intensive human interaction leads to triple. It led to triple the improvement compared to the standard care. So if you just leave a child without no intensive human interaction and you say, okay, no screens, go do whatever, that's not enough. That there is no speed of progress. So 3 times the speed of progress and improvement was when you had intensive human interaction. So this is not just the data. This is a reminder that connection, it can make a difference, and presence matters. Okay. Another case study from France in 2020, a 3-year-old boy was diagnosed with autism after clinicians recommended a complete withdrawal of screen exposure and intensive parent-child interaction, which is face-to-face play, book reading, outdoor activities. That child's symptoms dramatically improved within a few months. So this is not a quick fix. Some of them, they take longer than others. And another study in Eastern Europe in 2018 found that multiple cases of toddlers aged 2 to 4 years old who displayed autistic-like symptoms after a long time of daily screen use, after they strictly removed the screen and replacing it with structured social engagement and play, the children came back to normal speech, normal interaction within 6 to 12 months. So 6 months to 1 year. Some clinical implications and best practice recommendations. Early screening. It's very important to implement routine screen time assessments in all pediatric and developmental clinics. The screen for digital media habits at 12 months, 8 months, and 24 months while child visits should be done. Tailored intervention. We should develop intervention programs based on digital exposure history and symptoms, and we focus on restoring the natural social learning environments. The world is going towards digital, toward virtual. We need to have more human interaction, face-to-face interaction. And a family-centered care, engage the whole family in the treatment process, not only the mother, not only the father, not only the mother and the father. Everybody who's in the family should be involved in this process. And we create a multidisciplinary support team for a comprehensive care. Some future directions and takeaways. Research is still needed. A longitudinal studies and formal diagnostic criteria to be developed. We always do prevention focus first. Public health education, screen time policy guidance. Every mother, every Every parent should know about screen time, what it can do to children, what's the effect of it. It's not like, okay, he's just watching educational videos. That is different. That is also includes watching screens. Reversibility, early intervention, critical for symptom reversal. If it's virtual autism, early intervention can reverse these symptoms. The longer you keep these symptoms going on, the longer it will take to be reversed. And always a balanced approach is the best. Technology management without unnecessary panic. Everything is about balance. We're not saying to remove all the life of the person, technology or screens. Definitely not. But at those critical developmental stages, remove them, have them not have access to these things. 10 minutes if you have to do something or you're somewhere, no problem, but not extensive use. When they grow up and they become older, 4, 5, 6, have a balanced approach. You time it and you have it under your control. Thank you very much for attending. You can check us on Instagram. We have other webinars and other classes you can attend. You can follow us on Instagram, on TikTok, and thank you for joining.